1,000 alien battleships bore down upon the last human resistance, each bristling with planet-cracking weapons enough to glass Earth thrice over. Yet the lone human destroyer stood defiant, determined to hold them off or die trying. "You cadets think you know what it means to face impossible odds," Captain Anthony Lewis grumbled at the fresh-faced recruits staring wide-eyed before him. "Let me tell you about Epsilon Eridani B. The year was 2347. Humans had just scraped together our first extrasolar colony, a research outpost on the edge of Vorkarian space. I commanded the TDS Indomitable back then, sole protector for those 50 brave scientists." The aging vet's eyes grew distant as he recounted that fateful day. Alarms blared. Sensors lit up. 1,000 Vorkarian dreadnoughts, each 2 clicks long, tore out of hyperspace in attack formation, guns primed and locked on target. At their head, the notorious Admiral Rhaegor, an alien as ruthless as he was brilliant. "This is Rhaegor of the Vorkarian Supremacy," a flanged voice boomed across comms. "Your pitiful colony infringes on our territory. Power down and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and I will atomize your outpost and that pathetic destroyer you call a warship. This system belongs to us now." Lewis stared into the forward viewport at the armada assembled against him. 1 human ship, 1,000 alien battleships. Those were the odds, not just for the Indomitable, but for all mankind. He knew, deep in his bones, that this fight was coming since the day humans first dared step into the stars. What happened here would decide the future, whether humans would be a free species or crushed under the Vorkarian fist. Rhaegor's ultimatum hung in the air, an instant from being answered by mass driver and plasma beam. Captain Lewis glared at Rhaegor's smug face on the view screen, static occasionally warping his alien features. Lewis felt his jaw tighten as his mind raced with options. Only one idea bubbled to the surface, a long shot, but it was all they had. He looked to his chief engineer. "Henderson, I need you to modify the hyperspace drive. Rig it to create a localized distortion field." Henderson stared, slack-jawed. "Sir, that's never been done before. The stress it would put on the drive—" "I know the risks," Lewis cut him off. "But it's our only shot. Lure the Vorkarians in close, then trigger the field. It should cause their ships to collide." "Aye, sir, we'll get it done." Henderson hurried off, shouting orders. Lewis turned back to the view screen. "Admiral Rhaegor, I have a few questions before I consider your offer." "By what right do you claim this system?" Lewis demanded. "Epsilon Eridani B was uninhabited when we arrived." Rhaegor smashed a fist on his armrest. "By right of conquest, we are the superior species. What we want, we take." Lewis scoffed. "So might makes right. You're nothing but galactic bullies picking on those weaker than you." As Rhaegor sputtered in outrage, Lewis risked a glance at Henderson. The engineer caught his eye and nodded. It was ready. "Enough," Rhaegor roared. "All ships open." "Now," Lewis ordered. A flash of light burst from the Indomitable. The fabric of space rippled and tore. Vorkarian ships closest to the field crumpled like tin cans, crushed by the immense gravity. Others careened out of control, smashing into their neighbors. A cruiser slammed into a battleship. Both vanished in a blinding fireball. In seconds, a third of the alien armada was reduced to twisted wreckage. The remaining ships scattered in disarray, desperately trying to escape the maelstrom. Lewis grimaced as the Indomitable shuddered around him, the ship straining under the immense forces it had just unleashed. Readouts flashed red across the bridge consoles. The distortion field had saved them from immediate destruction, but it had come at a cost. Henderson's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, the hyperspace drive is offline. We've got hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. We need to set her down now." Lewis gripped the armrests of his chair. "Do it, find us a landing spot on Epsilon Eridani B." The Indomitable limped through the atmosphere, a trail of smoke marking its descent. With a bone-rattling thud, the ship touched down on the planet's rocky surface. "Damage report," Lewis barked. "Shields are down, weapons are at half capacity," Henderson replied. "But we're in one piece. It'll take time to repair the drive." Lewis nodded. Get on it, we bought ourselves a reprieve, but it won't last long. On the VDS Imperator, Admiral Rigor slammed his fist into the console, his face contorted with rage. The bridge crew flinched as sparks flew. Status, Rigor demanded. We lost 342 ships, sir, his first officer reported, his voice trembling. The rest are regrouping, but they took heavy damage. Rigor seethed. The humans had caught him off guard, a mistake he did not intend to repeat. Prepare the troops for a ground assault, Rigor ordered. I want that human ship found and destroyed. Leave no survivors. As the Vorkarian soldiers readied their weapons and boarded dropships, Lewis and his crew worked frantically to shore up their defenses. They hauled artillery from the Indomitable's armory and set up a perimeter around the crash site. Engineers welded metal plates over the hull breaches, while medics tended to the wounded. Lewis pulled aside Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reeves, his second-in-command and trusted friend. Marcus, I need you to take a team to the research outpost, Lewis said. Evacuate the scientists and destroy any sensitive data. We can't let it fall into Vorkarian hands. Reeves nodded. Understood, sir. We'll get them out. As Reeves gathered his team and set out across the harsh terrain of Epsilon Eridani B, Lewis turned to the rest of his crew. This is it, people, he said. We're the last line of defense. The Vorkarians will show no mercy. We have to hold them off, no matter the cost. The crew met his gaze with determination in their eyes. They knew the odds they faced, but they would not back down. In the distance, the roar of Vorkarian dropships grew louder, a swarm descending upon their position. Lewis took a deep breath and readied his weapon. The battle for Epsilon Eridani B, for the very future of humanity, was about to begin. As Reeves and his squad rushed toward the outpost, Captain Lewis continued, the situation rapidly deteriorated. Vorkarian dropships had already deposited a scouting force, and the scientists were fighting a losing battle. Plasma fire lit up the outpost's reinforced walls as Reeves's team hit the ground running. The stench of ozone and scorched metal hung thick in the air. Reeves barked orders, directing his soldiers into cover. They returned fire, their pulse rifles cracking like thunder. Vorkarian scouts fell, their armor ruptured by high-velocity rounds. Reeves dove behind a boulder, narrowly evading a sizzling plasma bolt. He popped up, sighted a Vorkarian, and squeezed the trigger. The alien's head snapped back, spraying green ichor. Suppressing fire, Reeves roared. Michaels and Guyan flank left, Chen with me. The squad split, maneuvering to catch the Vorkarians in a crossfire. Reeves and Chen sprinted for the outpost entrance, picking off aliens as they went. A plasma grenade detonated nearby, showering them with dirt and debris. The heavy blast door groaned open, revealing a haggard woman in a torn lab coat. Thank God you're here, Dr. Elizabeth Carlson gasped. They broke through our perimeter. Reeves ushered her inside, Chen covering their six. The outpost interior was a mess of shattered equipment and flickering lights. Frightened scientists huddled in the corners, clutching makeshift weapons. Dr. Captain Lewis sent us to evacuate you, Reeves said. We need to move now. She led them to a reinforced vault. Inside, glowing crystals pulsed with an eerie blue light. Eridanium, Carlson breathed. A superconductor with unparalleled electromagnetic properties. With this, we might stand a chance against the Vorkarians. Reeves stared at the crystals, mind racing. This could change everything. He made a decision. We're taking this back to the Indomitable, he declared. Carlson, gather your people in the Eridanium. We're getting you out of here. As the scientists hastily packed up their research, Reeves's squad established a perimeter. But their respite was short-lived. Sensors flared, detecting incoming hostiles. A lot of them. Lieutenant, Chen called, pointing to the scanners. Vorkarian reinforcements closing fast. Chen, take the scientists and get them to the Indomitable, he ordered. I'll hold off the Vorkarians, buy you some time. Chen hesitated. Sir, that's suicide. Chen saluted, a mixture of respect and sorrow in his eyes. He hustled the scientists out, Eridanium in tow. Reeves watched them go, then turned to face the oncoming storm. Vorkarian troops swarmed over the hills, a sea of armored bodies and glinting weapons. Plasma rained down around Reeves as he took cover, returning fire. His rifle bucked against his shoulder, each shot finding its mark. But it wasn't enough. For every alien he felled, 3 more took its place. They were closing in, their shots growing more accurate. Reeves's armor smoked where Plasma scored hits. He ejected a spent power cell, slamming home a fresh one. His breath came ragged. This was it, his final stand. Reeves rose from cover, a battle cry on his lips. He charged forward, rifle spitting death, a lone human against a tide of alien might. Plasma bolts struck him, searing through his armor, but he pushed on. His rifle clicked empty. He cast it aside, drawing his sidearm. Still he advanced, pouring shot after shot into the Vorkarian ranks. A plasma bolt took him in the leg. He stumbled, fell to one knee. The Vorkarians closed in, their shadow falling over him. Reeves looked up at the alien horde, a defiant grin on his face. "Come on then, you bastards," he snarled. "Come and get me." Captain Lewis paused, the weight of that desperate moment hanging in the air. The cadets leaned forward, hanging on his every word. "The battle raged around the Indomitable," Lewis continued, his voice gruff with emotion. "Vorkarian troops surged against our defenses, plasma fire lighting up the sky. My crew fought like devils, pouring everything they had into holding the line." Pulse rifles cracked. Grenades detonated with concussive force. Soldiers on both sides fell, their cries lost in the chaos. Lewis barked orders, rallying his beleaguered crew. An explosion rocked the ground nearby, showering them with dirt and shrapnel. Lewis ducked, then popped up to drop a charging Vorkarian with a well-placed shot. Just then a shout rose above the din. Lewis spun to see Dr. Carlson and her team sprinting toward the Indomitable, a glowing case clutched tight in her arms. "Captain," Carlson yelled, "the Eridanium, we have it." Hope surged in Lewis's chest, tempered by the cold reality of their situation. The Vorkarians pressed in from all sides, their superior numbers taking a toll. "Get that case to Hawkins now," Lewis roared. As Carlson and her team raced for the ship, Lewis keyed his comm. "Hawkins, tell me you can do something with this Eridanium." "I've got an idea, Captain," Hawkins replied, his voice tight with tension. "A focused EMP using the Eridanium as a catalyst. It might buy us some time." Lewis turned back to the battle, his rifle bucking in his hands. They just needed to hold out a little longer. But the Vorkarians kept coming, heedless of their losses. For every one that fell, 2 more took its place. They swarmed over barricades, shrugging off the hail of gunfire. Lewis knew they couldn't maintain this pace. It was now or never. "Strike team on me," he barked. "We're going to hit their flank, buy Hawkins the time he needs." A dozen grim-faced soldiers fell in behind Lewis as he charged into the fray. They smashed into the Vorkarian line like a hammer, close enough to see the whites of their enemies' eyes. Rifle butts cracked against armored skulls. Plasma scorched and seared. Lewis fought like a man possessed, his world narrowed to the next target, the next thrust and parry. And then the unthinkable. A breach in the hull, Vorkarian troops pouring into the Indomitable itself. Lewis's blood ran cold. "Hawkins!" he shouted into his comm, desperation coloring his voice. "Tell me that EMP is ready." A burst of static. Then Hawkins's voice, strained but triumphant. "Ready, Captain, but there's a catch. We'll be caught in the blast radius. It'll disable the Indomitable too." "Do it." He took a deep breath, steadying himself for what was to come. One way or another, this ended now. "All hands brace for impact," Lewis yelled, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Hawkins, hit it." A blinding flash erupted from the Indomitable's hull, a pulsing wave of electromagnetic energy that swept across the battlefield like divine judgment. The EMP swept across the battlefield like the hand of an angry god. Vorkarian soldiers collapsed, their weapons exploding in showers of sparks, but the damage was done. The Indomitable lay crippled, her hull breached, power flickering. On the bridge, Captain Lewis pulled himself to his feet, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He surveyed the scene of destruction, the acrid stench of smoke filling his nostrils. "Hull integrity compromised," Lieutenant Chen replied, her voice strained. "Weapons offline, shields at 15%. Lewis gritted his teeth. They'd bought themselves a reprieve, but at great cost. The Indomitable was in no shape for a prolonged fight. "Captain," Ensign Nakamura called from the sensor station. "Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. It's the Vorkarian fleet." Lewis's blood ran cold. On the view screen, a swarm of alien battleships tore into real space, their hulls bristling with weapons. At their center, the massive form of High Admiral Rigor's flagship, the Imperator. "Rhaegar," Lewis growled. "He's come to finish the job." As if on cue, Rhaegar's sneering face filled the view screen. "Captain Lewis, your pathetic resistance ends now. Surrender, and I may grant you a swift death." Lewis glared back, defiance etched in every line of his face. "We will never surrender, Rhaegar, not while a single human still draws breath." The Vorkarian fleet moved into position, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Lewis knew they had only moments before the bombardment began, before the Indomitable and the outpost below were reduced to molten slag. Down in engineering, Lieutenant Hawkins wiped sweat from his brow, his face illuminated by the eerie blue glow of the iridanium crystals. "We're working on it, Captain," he replied, his voice tense. "The crystals are integrated into the missile warheads, but the launchers took a beating in the EMP. We're trying to bypass the damaged circuits." On the bridge, Lewis watched the Vorkarian ships loom ever closer, the seconds ticking down to annihilation. The deck shuddered beneath Lewis's feet as the first salvo of plasma rained down from the Vorkarian ships, slamming into the outpost below. Explosions blossomed on the surface, the shock waves buffeting the Indomitable. "Hawkins!" "Got it. Launchers online." Lewis didn't hesitate. "Fire everything we've got." From the Indomitable's battered hull, a swarm of missiles streaked forth, their exhaust trails painting the void with fire. The Vorkarian ships opened up with point defense lasers, trying to swat the incoming ordnance from the sky. But these were no ordinary missiles. Within each warhead, an iridanium crystal pulsed with eldritch energy, a shard of cosmic power harnessed for war. The lasers sliced into the missile bodies, but couldn't penetrate the crystals at their core. The missiles struck home, puncturing the Vorkarian shields like they were tissue paper. Explosions rippled along the alien hulls as the warheads detonated within, the iridanium crystals shattering into a million razor-sharp fragments. And with each fragment, a burst of debilitating energy, a localized EMP that surged through the Vorkarian ships like a raging flood. Lights flickered and died. Control panels exploded in showers of sparks. Vorkarian crew members collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. On the bridge of the Imperator, Rhaegar staggered as his ship shuddered around him, alarms blaring, the stench of burning circuitry filling the air. He watched in disbelief as his fleet fell apart before his eyes, proud battleships reduced to drifting hulks. There was no time to ponder the question. A proximity alert screamed in warning as the Indomitable surged forward, battered but unbroken, her forward batteries spitting fire. Rhaegar had only a moment to register the human ship filling his view screen before the world dissolved in a maelstrom of flame and shrapnel. Captain Lewis watched the Imperator shatter under the Indomitable's guns, the once mighty Vorkarian flagship reduced to an expanding cloud of debris. "Rhaegar's flagship is destroyed, Captain," Lieutenant Chen reported, her voice filled with awe. "The remaining Vorkarian ships are in full retreat." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, a sound of pure defiance and triumph against impossible odds. Lewis allowed himself a moment to savor it, to bask in the knowledge that for the first time in history, a human ship had defeated a Vorkarian fleet. But even as the crew celebrated, Lewis knew this was only the beginning. The Vorkarians would be back, and in greater numbers. Humanity had won a battle, but the war for the stars was just getting started. The aging captain turned to his crew, his eyes alight with a new fire. "This is just the first step," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of, that we will not go quietly into the night, that we will fight for our place among the stars, no matter the odds." He looked out at the viewport, at the infinite expanse of space stretching before them, a frontier waiting to be explored, to be claimed. "And we will not stop," Lewis declared, "until the stars themselves bear the banner of Earth." The void of space erupted in a kaleidoscope of destruction as the Indomitable pressed its advantage against the reeling Vorkarian fleet. Eridanium-infused missiles streaked from the human ship's launchers, slamming into the alien vessels with devastating effect. Vorkarian hulls buckled and ruptured under the onslaught, the debilitating energy fields of the shattered crystals wreaking havoc on their systems. But even with this unexpected edge, Captain Lewis knew their situation remained dire. The Indomitable, for all its tenacity, was still one ship against an armada. They couldn't win a war of attrition. "So we've got to cut the head off the snake," Lewis growled, his eyes locked on the tactical display. "Reeves!" Lieutenant Commander Reeves, still clad in his battle-scarred armor from his planetside exploits, snapped to attention. "Sir!" Reeves nodded grimly. "Aye, Captain, I'll get it done." As the Indomitable's remaining shuttles streaked towards the looming bulk of the Vorkarian flagship, Reeves and his hand-picked team checked their weapons. Each rifle gleamed with the telltale blue sheen of Eridanium rounds, the Marine's armor similarly adorned with shards of the potent crystal. The shuttles punched through the Imperator's weakened shields, latching onto its hull like ticks. Reeves was first out the hatch, his rifle barking as he cut down the Vorkarian soldiers scrambling to repel the boarders. "Move," he barked, his team fanning out behind him. They fought like men possessed, Eridanium rounds felling Vorkarians with ruthless efficiency. But the aliens gave as good as they got. Plasma fire scorched the corridors, the acrid stench of burning metal and flesh filling the air. Reeves gritted his teeth as a bolt seared across his pauldron, the heat palpable even through his armor. Inch by bloody inch they fought their way towards the bridge, a trail of Vorkarian dead marking their passage. Reeves led from the front, his rifle a blur of motion, each shot finding its mark with uncanny precision. As they neared their goal, the resistance intensified. Vorkarian elites, their armor bedecked with the sigils of Rhaegar's personal guard, poured into the corridor. Reeves roared a challenge and charged, his men surging forward behind him. It was brutal, vicious work. Reeves fought like a man unleashed, rifle and blade working in deadly harmony. Vorkarians fell before him, but not without cost. He saw men he'd fought beside for years cut down, their blood mingling with that of the aliens on the deck plates. With a final desperate push, they breached the bridge. Reeves stormed in, rifle leveled, his surviving men fanning out to secure the room. And there, amidst the chaos, stood High Admiral Rhaegar himself. The alien leader regarded Reeves with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect, his own weapon held loosely at his side. "So," Rhaegar hissed, "the humans send their best to challenge me." Reeves said nothing, his rifle trained unwaveringly on the Admiral's head. For a long, tense moment the two warriors stared each other down, the fate of their respective species hanging in the balance. Then slowly, incredibly, Rhaegar lowered his weapon. "I have underestimated your kind," the alien admitted, each word sounding like it was dragged from him. "Such tenacity, such resourcefulness. Perhaps there is more to humanity than I believed." Reeves kept his rifle steady, hardly daring to breathe. Was this a trick? "I will order a ceasefire," Rhaegar continued, "and withdraw my forces from this system. Further conflict serves neither of us." Slowly, carefully, Reeves lowered his own weapon. "Wise choice, Admiral." As Rhaegar moved to his console to issue the stand-down order, Reeves allowed himself a moment to breathe. Against all odds, they'd done it. They'd fought the Vorkarian juggernaut to a standstill and forced a peace, however tenuous. But even as relief washed over him, Reeves knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had just gotten a whole lot bigger, and humanity had taken its first steps onto a wider stage. What came next would decide the fate of their species for good or ill. As the cadets listened intently, Captain Lewis continued his tale of the aftermath of the battle for Epsilon Eridani B. In the days that followed, he said, a strange thing happened. The Vorkarians, our sworn enemies, became our unlikely allies. Under the terms of the ceasefire, Vorkarian engineers worked side by side with the Indomitable's crew, repairing the damage wrought by the fierce fighting. Plasma torches flared and sparks flew as the two sides labored to mend hull breaches and restore power to crippled systems. At first the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with lingering mistrust, but as the days turned into weeks, a tentative camaraderie began to form. Human and Vorkarian alike marveled at each other's ingenuity and resourcefulness, finding common ground in their shared love of science and discovery. Dr. Carlson was at the forefront of this new partnership, Lewis recalled. She and her team shared their knowledge of Eridanium with the Vorkarians, who were astounded by the mineral's potential. The aging captain smiled at the memory of Vorkarian scientists hunched over microscopes, their eyes wide with wonder as they studied the crystalline samples. For a species that had conquered half the galaxy, they had never encountered anything quite like Eridanium. It was a turning point, Lewis said, a chance for both our peoples to learn from each other, to grow beyond the hatred and fear that had driven us to war. That chance took on new meaning when High Admiral Rigor extended an unexpected invitation. As a gesture of goodwill, he proposed that a delegation from the United Earth Federation visit the Vorkarian homeworld, Vorkos Prime, to discuss a formal peace treaty and establish diplomatic relations. I was chosen to lead that delegation, Lewis told the cadets. Me, the man who had fought the Vorkarians tooth and nail, now tasked with forging a lasting peace. He shook his head, still marveling at the twists of fate. When the human delegation arrived on Vorkos Prime, they were struck by the planet's beauty and the sophistication of Vorkarian society. Soaring cities of gleaming metal and crystal, vast gardens teeming with exotic flora, and art that spoke of a rich cultural heritage, it was a far cry from the brutal efficiency of the Vorkarian military. We were greeted not as enemies, but as respected adversaries, Lewis said. The Vorkarian people were curious about us, eager to learn about our way of life. As the negotiations progressed, it became clear that this curiosity extended to the realms of science and technology. The Vorkarians were particularly interested in human advances in space exploration and resource management, areas where they believed they could learn much from their former foes. In exchange, they offered to share their own knowledge, advanced propulsion systems, energy production techniques, and more. For humanity, still taking its first steps into the wider galaxy, these technologies could be a game-changer. I saw an opportunity, Lewis said, his eyes gleaming with the same fire that had driven him to stand against impossible odds. A chance to forge a partnership that could change the course of both our species. He proposed a joint research initiative focused on the study and application of Eridanium. Human and Vorkarian scientists working side by side, pooling their knowledge and resources to unlock the secrets of this strange and wondrous mineral. Imagine it, Lewis said, his voice ringing with conviction. A future where our peoples stand together not as rivals, but as allies. A future where we explore the stars as one, pushing the boundaries of what is possible. He looked out at the sea of young faces before him, seeing in them the hope and promise of that future. That, cadets, is the legacy of Epsilon Eridani B. Not just a battle fought and won, but a new beginning for us all. The veteran captain fell silent, his gaze distant as if seeing that future unfold before his eyes. The cadets watched him, breathless, caught up in the vision he had painted. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines, carrying them ever forward into the unknown. Then, slowly, tentatively, a hand rose from the crowd. "Sir?" a young woman asked, her voice trembling with a mix of nerves and excitement. "What happened next with the Eridanium research and the alliance with the Vorkarians?" Captain Lewis smiled, a glint of mischief in his eye. "Ah, now that's another story entirely," he said. But let's just say it was only the beginning of a journey that would take us farther than any human had ever gone before. He stood, straightening his uniform with a crisp tug. But that's a tale for another time. For now you have duties to attend to. Dismissed. As the cadets filed out, murmuring excitedly among themselves, Lewis watched them go, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. They were the future, these bright young men and women, the ones who would carry the torch he and his crew had lit, who would see the alliance he had forged grow and flourish. And as he turned to gaze out the viewport at the stars streaking by, Captain Anthony Lewis knew, with a certainty that rang in his bones, that the best was yet to come. Admiral Lewis's voice grew heavy with sorrow, as he recounted the years that followed the forging of the human-Vorkarian alliance. At first it seemed like a new golden age was upon us, he said, his gaze distant. The joint research initiative on Eridanium yielded breakthroughs beyond our wildest dreams. Human and Vorkarian scientists worked side by side, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. He spoke of the marvels that emerged from this collaboration, propulsion systems that could cross the galaxy in mere weeks, energy shields that could withstand the fury of a supernova, medical technologies that promised to extend lifespans by centuries. He told of Zorval, a charismatic Vorkarian leader who rose to prominence in the years following the alliance. Zorval was a fierce traditionalist, a believer in the old ways of Vorkarian society. He saw the influence of humanity as a corrupting force, a threat to Vorkarian identity, Lewis explained. In his eyes, the alliance was a betrayal of everything his people stood for. In secret, Zorval gathered a following of like-minded Vorkarians, hardliners who longed for a return to the days of conquest and glory. They called themselves the true sons of Vorkar, and they began to plot against the alliance. They had access to the same advanced technologies that the alliance had developed, Lewis said, his voice tight with anger. And they used that technology to build an arsenal the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. The true sons struck without warning, their attacks ruthless and precise. Human and Vorkarian installations across the galaxy were targeted, their defenses overwhelmed by the sheer power of Zorval's weapons. The joint research facility on Epsilon Eridani B was one of the first to fall, Lewis said, his voice cracking with emotion. So many brilliant minds lost, so many friends. He spoke of Dr. Carlson, the woman whose discovery of Eridanium had made the alliance possible. She had been at the facility when Zorval's forces attacked, along with dozens of other top scientists from both species. They never stood a chance, Lewis whispered, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. As news of the attack spread, panic and confusion gripped the galaxy. The alliance, once a beacon of hope and unity, crumbled in the face of Zorval's onslaught. We found ourselves fighting side by side with the Vorkarians once again, Lewis said, but this time it was against an enemy that had risen from within our own ranks. The war that followed was long and brutal, a conflict unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The technologies that had once promised to usher in a new era of peace and prosperity were turned to the grim work of destruction. In the end, Zorval's forces were defeated, but the cost was almost too much to bear. The trust that had been built between humans and Vorkarians was shattered, replaced by a new era of suspicion and hostility. We had won the war, but in many ways we had lost the peace, Lewis said, his eyes haunted by the memories of those dark days. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.